What's up, everyone? I think there's a couple people in the chat. What's going on? If you're there, feel free to say something in the chat, introduce yourself, let me know that you're there. And we'll give a few more minutes before we actually start doing design, or not design reviews, resume reviews. We'll talk about like all of the different types of reviews that a friend of mine and I have done. But this one is at least starting with resume reviews. We'll see how many of those we have, and then maybe we'll move on to other things. So if you're in the chat, just let me know. Let me know you're there. Also, if you have a resume you would like to be reviewed, please send a link. If you have like a link to a Google Doc or something like that, that'd be great. I can take a look, and it would kind of help out the flow of the stream too. So if you feel like it, please do that. That would help. Stream last night, great talk. Thank you, Karma. Thanks for checking it out. Remind me where, Karma, where are you based? You're not in Memphis, right? And if you're not, the reason I ask, if you're not in Memphis, that's really, really cool. Actually, it's cool regardless, but okay, cool. Yes, from Pennsylvania. And I saw that you tweeted about it as well. Awesome. Thank you. So super cool that you saw that, because this is one of the few that the Memphis Web Workers group has streamed, and it sounds like it went pretty well. So thanks for coming to the talk. Thanks for participating. That's really, really cool. Walker, what's going on? Thanks for being here as well. I think I did a resume review for Walker back in the day. I don't know if, Walker, you want to send over an updated resume and I can take a look at that too. But I think I've gone through yours in the past. Mahmoud, if I'm saying that right, thanks for being here. What's going on? Karma, yeah, that's really cool. So the location that the stream was in last night, where the talk was last night, is inside of the FedEx Institute of Technology on the campus of University of Memphis. And they switched Brian, who runs the group, which will be here in a second. Thanks. I'm glad I pronounced that correctly. Good. Brian, who runs that group, who will join us. He's doing design reviews on his channel at Brian L. Robinson. He will join us shortly, but I think it's one of the first times that they've done that group inside of that room, and that room has the ability to stream, which is sounds like it turned out pretty good. So it's pretty sweet. I think it was relatively easy for him to set up, and I think that he'll probably plan on doing that in the future, and that just gets access to more, or provides content to more people across the world, which is really cool. So yeah, if you're just joining, if you're in, let me know in the chat that you're there, and then if you have a resume that you would like to get looked at, feel free to send like a Google Drive link. You can send that to me. If you don't want to do that in the chat, you can send it to me on Twitter at JamesQQuick, and then I can get it out of the DM and then pull it open. And what I'm trying to do is not show any personal information. So I'm trying to hide all of the like name and email and address and that sort of stuff. So hopefully you don't really have to worry about those kind of concerns, unless you want to share. That's fine too. Lawrence, what's going on? Lawrence was there last night. Lawrence, for what it's worth, if you're interested, people are saying that the stream last night was good, that the content came through with high quality, which is cool. All right, cool. So Mahmoud actually sent one. Thank you. I'll actually start with that one. I've got a few in the backlog, but I will open this one up first. And what's the best way to... I'm going to open this up and then scroll down really quickly. That way I hide most of your personal information. Cool. So I will go through this one in a minute. I just want to start by giving a shout out to something I haven't done in a while, but something that Brian Robinson, who I mentioned, who runs a channel as well, Brian L. Robinson, he should be joining us in maybe 30 minutes or so. What's going on, Will? Thanks for being here. We had this idea of, we were creating content on doing like resume reviews. I was doing code and resume reviews, so you could send me a project or resume, and I was recording like one-off videos on those reviews. Brian, on the other hand, was doing design and portfolio. So there was another category he did, I guess, yeah, design and portfolio. So he would go through, and he's much more of a designer than I am, and he would go look at a website and give some feedback on that website, which he still does on that Twitch channel that I mentioned. So you should check it out if you're interested in that. But we had this idea of like, as developers, we should be able to help each other and review things for each other and be able to provide feedback so that we have kind of this like network of people that can help each other grow and get better. And so we started something called peerreviews.dev. You can go to the website out here, peerreviews.dev. So you can go and check it out. And what we've got links to on here are just recent reviews that we've done on YouTube. And you'll probably notice that these are not actually that recent. These go back a little way. So he's been doing his design reviews on Twitch, and someone asked me for some feedback on a resume. It gave me the idea to go ahead and do an episode, a Twitch stream episode on reviews as well. So that's what we're here for. If you have questions, comments, if you have suggestions for other people's resumes that we go and review, please send them in the chat. That would be great. I want this to be as interactive as possible. Walker, you can send it to me wherever. If you're comfortable sending it in the chat, feel free to do that. You can send it to me to my personal email. I think you have that. If not, I don't mind sharing it with people. I can just say it out loud. But you can send it to me, either one, wherever you're comfortable with. So that's the idea. I've got Mahmoud sent his resume. We'll start with that one. I've got a couple that people had requested from the peerreviews.dev website. And just, I didn't mention this, you can actually do your request for these type of things. So Walker, you can go and do that, where you can send us some information about what you're looking for, what type of review, what your name is, URL, a link to your resume, and so on, and submit that. And what that does is actually send a message to a Trello card, a Trello list, and I can go and pull that information from there. Walker, if you don't mind, why don't you actually use the peerreviews.dev site and do your request there? And then that way I'll have all the information I need. I can go and pull it out of that Trello card if that's cool. And if not, Slack works too. I've actually got Slack closed. I would rather not open it just because of OBS like being as powerful as it is. Anyway. So thank you for the design feedback on this. This was set up by Brian, not me. I had nothing to do with it. He did it and it looks nice, which is cool. So let's start with, this is Mahmoud's. Let me, cool. So let me take a look. One, I think this is probably a Google template, or it's very similar to a template that you can get inside of Google Docs. Let me actually, and if it's not it, if it is, that's totally fine. If it's not, that's obviously totally fine too. Let me just search for what I'm talking about. So let's just look up resume, not those, but where do I see like templates? Anybody know where I search for those templates in? Oh, it's actually this one right here. Or this is what I'm thinking of. It may not be the same one that you're using, but this is what I'm thinking of. This is a template that I actually use for my personal resume. It's probably used by tons of people, which is like, it's not that big a deal, but it's clean and it's simple and blah, blah, blah. So let's see. I like one, to kind of follow the idea of this template. I like the skills section. I like that you've got them broken out into languages and frameworks. I think that's very useful. One of you'll hear basically the same kind of advice for the most part on all of these resumes. One, you probably know that recruiters and people who review resumes literally spend an average of like 10 seconds or 15 or 20 seconds looking at a resume. So you really want the things that are most important on your resume to stand out. Cool. So you are using that template. Not a problem at all. I would actually highly recommend that. I think it's a great idea. So don't take that as a negative. I like it. It's clean. It works. So I like having the different sections specifically for languages, frameworks, tools, and platforms, and then design. I think those are great sections to have those laid out in. I think I can really easily go and I can see what you have experience with. I don't know one small thing. It looks like maybe missing a comma between rollup and netlify, unless rollup netlify is a thing. I don't think it is, but I'm not sure. The items inside of tools and platforms, it's a little random. I don't think that's necessarily a problem either. I think that's kind of like, it's vague enough of a header that I think those things make sense in there. They just are kind of random, but it is what it is. One of the things I would kind of ask about if I were to interview you to have Webpack as a tool on your resume is what kind of scenario have you used Webpack specifically? So the reason I ask, Webpack is like really, to me, confusing and like way overdone to be able to set up basic configurations for bundling and that kind of stuff. I would be curious, have you used Webpack in the sense of like, are you using Webpack that's already pre-configured with something like Create React App or Angular CLI or Vue CLI projects, or have you actually gone in and configured your own Webpack project? I would probably ask you about that just because it's one of those things that I want to know if you put it on your resume, in what situation and how deeply have you used it? And that's just one that kind of stands out to me because I know enough about it to know one way or another when you explain it, does that make sense, I guess. Cool. So looking at education, so you have a bachelor's degree in media engineering and technology, configured it from scratch once. And to your point of that's what's important is being on it. Yeah, never again because it's not fun. But you want to be honest, right? So I definitely don't mind you having that on your resume. But if somebody asks you, I would expect you to be honest and just say, hey, yeah, I've configured it once. If you could explain to me why you think it's complicated, and especially if you have like, oh, I've used Parcel and that was a lot simpler, or I don't feel the need to do that because front-end frameworks like Create React App configurations take care of that for me. If you explain that, that's totally good in a conversation. I don't need you to really dive deeper because I don't think that's necessarily super important. That's why those configurations are already out there. So good. That would be a fun conversation to kind of have and get your opinion on. So a German university in Cairo, is that the name of the college, just out of curiosity? Or is that just a description of the college? So BS in Media Engineering and Technology, majoring in Computer Science, third year undergraduate. That's a bit confusing. So BS in Media Engineering and Technology. I'm wondering what the difference in that versus majoring in Computer Science is. And then you're a third year undergraduate. So you're currently getting your undergraduate degree now. So it says June 2022. BS in... So a couple of things that are a little bit confusing there. What's the difference between saying that you've got a Bachelor's of Science in Media Engineering and then majoring in Computer Science? I'm assuming that means you finished your BS in Media Engineering and now you're currently majoring for a second degree in Computer Science. Maybe some clarity around that would help. Third year undergraduate, does that mean you're currently a third year? How many years is the program, just out of curiosity? Anyway, that's a little bit confusing for me. I'm not sure what those actually add up to. College de la Salle, that is some French words. Scientific major, graduated with honors. For that amount of time, I'm assuming that's like a grade school through high school type thing. If it's 2005 through 2017, that makes me think that you graduated high school in 2017. I don't know what this part, the 14 of 20, assuming that's yes, I'm a student. The name of the degree is Media Engineering, but in reality, it's just CS. Okay. I would probably choose one of those. If Computer Science more represents what you are getting your degree for, I would just say Computer Science to get rid of a little bit of the ambiguity. And I don't know what the 1420 means, if that's a grade or like a GPA. I don't know if that's good or bad, to be honest. Usually the recommendation I give for people is basically include your GPA and your grades if they are helpful for you. Should remove high school? Not necessarily. Again, depending on your age, I think as you start your career and add more things to your resume, then you can start removing high school. But you don't have an overwhelming amount of stuff on your resume. It actually is like a perfect, always recommend for the most part, a one-page resume. You've got it clearly defined into the different sections. You've got enough stuff. I don't think you need to remove it. I think as you add things that are more relevant, you will then go back and remove the high school section. Front-end developer intern, worked with front-end team on layouts and UI components for multiple websites using various front-end technologies. Cool. That's awesome experience. One of the things that I would suggest in there is go ahead and throw in the keywords that make that experience relevant. So I look for a little bit of repetition. If you say you have experience in these libraries, frameworks, languages, tools, and platforms, over on the right-hand side, I also want to see that those technologies referenced in your actual experience. So if you say you have it over in the skills section, I want to see in your experience where you applied those skills or where you learned those skills. So I would include maybe like worked with front-end team on layouts for multiple websites, using React, Gatsby, and React testing library and Bootstrap, whatever. Like, go ahead and list those out under experience for me. September, junior teaching assistant, volunteer to teach data structures to algorithms. Cool. I like that. That's great. That's good experience to have. Shows that you, at the very least, have a little bit more experience with it because you probably took the class and then stayed around for that class. That's experience that's going to help you in programming interviews, assuming they get down to like live whiteboarding or like writing code type thing. That's the kind of experience that will help. I love that you have personal projects. A little bit about my background. I started with Microsoft, and one of the biggest things that the Microsoft recruiter said to me in college was, like, we want to see a section called hobby projects or personal projects. We want to see the things that you've done outside of the classroom. Because everybody with a CS degree takes the same classes, they do the same things, they do the same homework assignments. It's the things that you do outside of that that really set you apart. So I love that you have personal projects on here. Sounds like you've actually listed out the different technologies. Great, I like that. React style components, Axios. I love that you included testing. I don't know enough about testing. I should know more. Gatsby, I like that you clarified static site generator, styled components. Cool. IdeaPad. Is this? I feel like that sounds familiar. Have we talked about this before? Stack web application we're using create, edit, and delete notes. That's great. You got a full stack thing. I love that you've got an experience that takes you full stack. Getting into the database, getting into the back end. I love that. That's absolutely amazing. Great. Keep that up. JC, what's going on? Welcome to the stream. Thanks for coming. Cool that you have different languages as well. So Arabic is native, fluent in English, French, intermediate in Spanish. Podemos hablar un poco en español. I'm actually pseudo studying German now. I can say things like Ich bin ein Mann. I'm a man. I can say other things, but that's kind of it. So that's cool that you have that much experience in different languages. That's really powerful, I think. Extracurriculars. Cool. Google Hashcode, awesome. Game art design mentor, cool. I think you've got great stuff on your resume. This is really powerful. I'm a big fan. It's cleanly laid out. It's divided into the different sections that I think make a lot of sense. I think you can add a couple of your buzzwords, your keywords inside of your experience tab. I think you can clarify a little bit on your what your degree is. I would just call it computer science and just run with that because it's more what the degree does for you than the actual title of that degree. So I would just run with that. I like that you took a starter template and then customized it. This looks really nice. It's really clear to me. It's really clean. It's easy to get through. There's not too much wording or too many words on there. I think it's really good. In the chat, I'm going to take a breath because I've been talking a lot. Any other feedback on the resume that we're looking at? Any other thoughts? Mahmoud, any responses to the things that I'm saying? Throw those in the chat and I'll give you a second. In the meantime, I'll welcome L Punisher to the chat, as well as there's probably Commander Root is back. Thanks for coming back. Ken from Code Crew. Ken, what's up? Thanks for coming. Appreciate you being here. Hopefully, do you have any students with you? I would love to talk to some of the Code Crew students. It's a boot camp, or Code Crew is an organization that helps teach programming to students. Code School is their full-time boot camp here in Memphis, which is an amazing program. So glad to have you here. Rubber Slayer, thanks for being here. And then anyone else that's in the chat or anyone else that's on that hasn't said anything in the chat, feel free to jump in also. Deep breath. This is not easy to do all this talking. All right, cool. So let me actually grab, so Walker sent his. Let me grab his for my Trello card over here. Get this to resize. Let me see if it popped up. That is not resizing, right? Anyway, let's scroll down. Did I get a resume request from Walker? Yes. Let me open this one up. And scroll up a little bit to hopefully skip some of the information. Cool. And let me see my Twitch. Punisher is my gaming Twitch profile. Felt weird hearing it in another context. No worries. Don't see any students here yet, but just messaged the album channel to come over. Cool. Ken, thanks for sharing that out. I appreciate it. All right, so Walker was actually, a little bit of context, was one of my students in a boot camp that we ran in Memphis called Launch Code. So Launch Code is an organization that runs boot camps, started in St. Louis, primarily in St. Louis and a few other cities, including the one instance of that boot camp that we ran here in Memphis. So Walker was one of my students, one of the students I've been most excited about. The community that we grew from that program has just been great. The TAs, the students, has been awesome. So let's go through here. Education at the very top. You've got your, it's in Kansas City as well. Oh, cool. Yeah, Launch Code is in several different cities. I actually was in South Florida, Fort Lauderdale, and saw some people there. Kansas City, I didn't know that. That's great to hear. So bachelor's of MIS, basically. Cool. So relevant, good stuff. I love that you have Launch Code on here. I think the people, when you go through a boot camp, the thing you're going to lack is the experience. For what it's worth, a boot camp is much more practical, like learning experience than what my formal computer science degree was. I felt like when I got out of my formal computer science degree, I didn't get the hands-on practical experience that people going through boot camps got. Format issue when I moved to Google Docs. Okay, you can fix the format issue, no worries. Mandani Tech. If that's how you say that, welcome from Code Crew or from Code School. Are you a current student? If so, if I haven't met you, I hope to meet you in some of the community events going forward. But when you go through a boot camp, that is the core of your experience. And so many times I saw people from class have resumes where they didn't sell Launch Code. It's the biggest thing, most relevant thing that they have on their resume, but they didn't sell it. Walker, I like that that's first and front up at the top. Yes, you can share a resume in the chat. You can also go to peerreviews.dev and you can put some information in a request there as well. So up to you. You can put it in the chat. You can also just put it in the request here for peerreviews.dev. Let's see, I missed. So, okay, Mandani, I hope I'm saying that right. Recent graduate, awesome. And then Melodi's here as well. Thanks for being here. I know I've met you in person. So where did we go? Where was Walker's? This way. All right, Walker. So you've got Launch Code. You might throw some bold on some of these keywords. I like to do that. IT support analyst, manage company assets, first time IT support contract, first line of IT support, network issues, documented known issues. Cool. Planned, just kind of reading through this. Windows 10 SQL Server, deployed firewalls. I would, let's see, how far down does this go? Okay, so since you've just got one line on the second page, I would definitely recommend to just cut back on a line inside of this experience. You've got several. Usually my general recommendation is like 2 to 3 bullet points per experience. Since this is your main experience, I think it's understandable to have a little bit more. But I would find a way to take one so that you've got a 1-page resume. For the most part, I recommend 1 page if it needs to be, and most people think it needs to be. Most of the time it doesn't. But if you really feel strongly about it, this would not be the case to leave it 2 pages if it's just 1 line. So I would go ahead and shorten that up. Memphis Institute of Leadership Education graduate. It'd be interesting to know a little bit more about what that is. So that might be a good one to just do like a bullet point description of what that item is. That might give a little bit of extra context and might carry some weight to it. Let's see. Okay. Hamida. So that's not different than your username, but I would much rather use people's names that they want to be called. So Hamida, if that's right, hopefully it is, then hopefully that'll work. Cool. The technical skill set, tools. I like that this is pretty concise. it doesn't take up that much room to do these different lines. I like that this is kind of left justified, and then to the right of it are these breakdown of tools, languages, projects. I think that's cool. So working knowledge of Python, JavaScript, and Java. Cool. Working knowledge. I could see you not listing working knowledge, not for any particular reason other than just like being a little wordy. I mean, it's not a big deal. Either way is fine. Then Git Bash, VS Code, Office 365 suite. I'm trying to think, did we cover things that you might not have considered that we covered? Okay, so that's the formatting issue. Cool. So you got it on one page probably. You don't have reference on here database. So that might be a good one to include in like tools to show that you've got the full stack experience. I would probably take your launch code, and we may have talked about this before, and I might put it in your experience section and shorten. I would still probably, regardless of whether or not you're on a second page, shorten this thing by 3 lines, 3 bullet points, and then elaborate more on launch code and really dive into like build full stack application using, or learn to build full stack applications using X, Y, and Z, that kind of stuff. Break those out into bullet points. I might do that. Update your tools to include something like your database. I'm trying to think if there's other things that we use that were relevant. Relevant courses. I think those make sense when you're either a student or a recent grad. Relevant courses. They do make sense if you need something to fill on your resume. What I would rather see is personal projects or something like that, because going back to that point earlier, everyone in college takes the same, like if you get a computer science degree or an MIS degree, you take basically the same classes. So nobody is that unique in terms of the classes that they take. So I would think, Walker, I know we've talked about some personal projects that you've, or at least one that you've worked on. I would lean more towards, instead of doing relevant courses, I would do relevant experience, or just throw them under the experience tab, or just call them like side projects or something like that. I would throw that into its own category and elaborate more on the things you've built outside of class, just because I know you've done it. So I know you have stuff that you can talk about. You may not be comfortable like selling it to someone else, but I know you can talk about that stuff. And it's a little bit more unique than just the classes that you've taken, because everyone more or less takes the same classes, if that makes sense. Frank, what's going on? Thanks for joining here as well. Overall, I think your layout is pretty solid. I think it's concise for the most part in terms of like space that it takes up. The only change would be to get rid of a couple of these lines in your current role, and then find some way to draw on the experience that you've got outside of the classroom, like the personal projects that we've talked about and you've asked me questions about, so I know you've worked on stuff. Find a way to draw experience from there and really highlight that inside of this resume. So set a candidate apart because it shows passion. Absolutely agree. Again, that was the number one piece of feedback that I got from the recruiter that I worked with at Microsoft. They want to see people who have passion, that are excited about it. In all of my interviews, and I've told my students this, all of my interviews, what I talked about 75% of the time was this Harry Potter trivia application that I built in Android, because it was something that I was excited about. I learned what I needed to build it, and I actually had it deployed and had like a real tangible thing to say, I learned these things, I built this thing, and it's out there for you to go and see. That's probably one piece of advice along the personal projects side as well. If you can have a link and have people actually see what you built, that's even better, so they can have a good gauge of visually what you're able to create. And then links to source code and that kind of stuff. But especially for me, I'm not really going to look at your source code other than maybe just kind of checking out what projects you have on GitHub and then the README page. And you can tell a lot of people who go through boot camp, so they take courses online, they've got like, okay, I built this thing. Well, I've taken a lot of courses and I've seen a lot of courses, so I know, hey, that's the same course that so-and-so taught, and that's the project that you build. That's not super unique because you built it during a course. So you do want to see things that you built yourself, even if it's closely related to something you've seen and watched content on. You want to build it yourself so that you have a little bit more of a unique story to tell. Cool. Did we get another resume? I think we did. So we just finished Walker's. I'm just looking in my, let's put that at the bottom, looking inside of, okay, so that was Walker's. Did I not move that? There's that one. And then here's this one. Bitly, the opening up here. Wow, this is kind of fancy. I don't know if you want, I don't even know what this section is. What am I viewing? Oh, this is in Dropbox. Okay. Interesting. Wow. Okay. Let me get back to the chat and make sure I can see that. I just want to take a quick pause really quickly also. See if you have any questions or comments as we keep going. One from Walker, I'll add some projects. Do I add a link directly on resume? If they, yeah, you can. Especially if it's a short link. You can do a hyperlink. So like if it's not going to help people that much if they print it out. Most people aren't printing it out, or they at least see it online. So I would say if it's a relatively short link, then you could just print it out. If not, you can do it as a hyperlink and just include it on theirs. So L Punisher, is this your resume that I'm looking at now on the page? I think this is it. I think you probably put it in the card too. Yeah. Looks like it. Yes, cool. By the way, I didn't put two and two together about your name. Awesome, very cool. Glad to have you. So, one, this looks really, really nice. The comment in the chat that for the most part I agree with is resume should be one page. And I think it's really tough for people to accept that. And I'm not even going to necessarily say in this one you should. Honestly, partially because it's so fun to look at that it's worth me going and reading more, to be honest. But for the most part, you want a one-pager. You definitely don't want to be in the boat where you've got no color, you've got no style, and you've got 5 pages printed out. That's terrible. That's not what you want at all. I've been on the reviewing end of that and trying, like I've got a stack of resumes and several of them are 3, 4, 5 pages long and it's all just text and there's no color and there's no break and like content separation. That's what you don't want. For the most part, I still do typically, regardless, recommend one page. This looks super cool. I am debating whether or not I would recommend taking away the core skills section. Because this is one of those things where it's all relative, right? This is your opinion of yourself. I don't like rating on a resume. The reason is no one's going to say they're terrible. And only a few people are going to like max out one of those rating systems to say that they're the best, because that's just setting yourself up to get attacked in a resume. So this is kind of what I would expect everyone to do. I would probably recommend taking this away. I think going back to the idea of you do have a lot of content on here. It looks like it's really good content, so that's great. I probably don't need that section. And I'm being picky just to try to give you some feedback because, again, I think it looks really good. I would say that one you probably don't need. A couple of comments in the chat. Would you have any concerns about scannability? I would want to see the skills section, not in this big of a display. And that might make sense to have over here on the sidebar. So let me think through a couple things here. And one, again, let me let you know, this looks super cool. So understand that I'm being picky with feedback. So scannability, I would like to see a section on skills that is not quite as big, and probably one of the first things I see over here on the right. To do that, I would probably shorten this. I would probably shorten that amount of content to be one paragraph instead of 3. I think that gains you a lot of space to open up a skills section that you can throw those skills on that page. And I think that would work out really well. So I think that is what I would recommend, is just to shorten that, throw your skills in that as a smaller thing. And yes, these would be skills relative to each other, but it's still so relative that it doesn't do anything for me. I'm going to gauge your knowledge of skills by the things you say in the interview versus what I read on a resume. And to be really blunt, like, your resume is literally just your way to try to get the interview. After that, it doesn't really matter. It's how you do in the interview. Does that make sense to people out there? Like, your resume is just to get you into an interview, and then the conversation, and if you get into programming challenges, that kind of stuff, that's the thing that actually gets you through a successful interview, if that makes sense. So the core skills don't mean much to me in terms of like the rankings. I would just want to see them listed to know what are your things that you care most about and have experience with. Recognition is super cool. Wow. I mean, those are like, Imagine Cup is huge. I was working for Microsoft at the time that you were in the finals for the Imagine Cup. That's a really big deal. I wonder what the programmer of the year is. That seems like a big deal also. Those are really great to have on there. So let's go back. We've got a couple of people put relevant things up higher, like education was a while ago. You have real experience in projects. Okay, so let's look at, I mean, you've got a lot of good stuff, just to be honest. Let's see. Work experience, developer advocate. Great. Go Advocates. Love it. Sea Walker, thanks for coming. Speaking of events, I wonder if bullet points might work better in terms of scannability. Because I actually have to read the paragraph. Now, again, you've got this big benefit of your stuff looks really nice, so I don't care spending more time on it. But for scannability, I have to read a paragraph, even though it's a short one, to find out what you did at the different jobs. January, hire freehands, web intern, student partner. That's awesome that you're a student partner. I worked a lot with our student partners in New York City and South Florida. So one thing that you just said in the chat is that you're looking to transition back to full stack web development, but my most recent experiences have been advocacy. So you can start to tailor your resume based on that. That's actually really important. The way you do your resume depends on what kind of job you're looking for. So those skill sections that you list as important, remote working. Okay, so let's go through these. Remote working, I don't care about. If you either want to work remotely and you think you can do it or not, I don't need to see that. Community building, developer advocacy. If you're trying to get back into a software development job, those are not skills that are most important to list on your resume. I would rather see what frameworks have you worked with in JavaScript, what databases. Looks like you've got SQL, you got Linux. I think you've got a couple of skills that you can take out based on the fact that you're saying you want to get back into development. Then you've got these side projects, which seem really awesome. And it looks like I may not be able to click on these, but these are development projects. So pull those up. You care about your getting into software development. Well, stress those things. These are great projects to have on there. And then maybe so at this point from 6 years ago, student partner is a really cool thing. Student partner is evangelism. If you're not looking to get into evangelism, do you need your student partner on your resume? Maybe not. Full stack developer, contract backend developer, developer advocate. Do any of those? No. So technical writer, if you're not looking to get into being a content creator, maybe you don't need that, since it's an additional thing that you did. It's not going to leave a gap in your resume, so you could potentially take that away. And you could just stress the other things that you've done with code. So overall, I would shorten the about me. I would throw the skill section in the about me. I would highlight the things in your work experience that are development related, because that's what you want to get into. Okay, so then I would take away your secondary school on education, you probably don't need to go back before. I would get rid of the last two. So keep your BS in computer science, get rid of the last two, throw those skills sections over there, and you got great stuff, man. This is amazing. This is really cool. You got great stuff on here. I think you focus at this point on software development and stress those things and go from there. But you've got a great resume. This is super cool. Brian is here. Welcome, Brian, and everyone that you rated with. We've probably got like a record number of people. This says 27 people that are here. That's probably a record, which is super sweet. And lots of people in the chat also. How would you recommend handling the gaps in employment if only the web development? So gaps in deployment, I wouldn't necessarily get rid of your developer advocate jobs. I think you could get rid of the technical writer, because technical writer doesn't, if you take that away, it doesn't leave a gap. So if you look at, you've got September 17th through March 19th, and then you've got, well, I guess you have a few months gap before your next job at Flutterware. It's a few months. It's not that big of a deal. I have a few months gap between leaving Microsoft and joining FedEx, so it's not that big a deal. But I don't think you take away both of your developer advocate jobs, because that is the experience that you have recently. I went from a developer advocate or an evangelist at Microsoft to a software developer at FedEx. You can certainly do that. Just tweak and focus on the things that make you a software developer. Don't hide the thing. Well, being an evangelist still helps, or an advocate still helps. Just don't focus on those things. Focus on software development. Cool. Welcome, everybody. So cool. Full chat in here as far as I'm concerned. Robert Tables, thanks for being here. Are you new? I've definitely seen you here before. Yeah, glad I'm El Punisher, or Adewale. Did I say that right? This should be really encouraging, because your stuff looks great, man. This is great experience. It's really cool. Good job. Chris G, what's up? Thanks for being here. Todd Libby, Todd Libby has interviewed on That's My Jamstack. Brian, is that right? Hopefully I'm right. I hate when I try to figure out who people are. Yeah, I'm right. Cool. I think I listened to yours is one of the more recent ones, hopefully. Did I feel rusty in my transition to FedEx? First time, but this looks great. I don't know. Should I say you're fat sack? Thanks for coming. Appreciate it. Yeah, Adewale is pronounced well. Thank you. Okay, Adewale, cool. The last question you asked, Adewale, is did I feel rusty? So here's the interesting thing. I started with Microsoft as an evangelist out of college. I did not have any software. I call you whatever you want. Cool. I did not have any software development experience. I had a degree in computer science, and I had evangelism experience, where I basically did very simple demos for conference talks and stuff like that. So I didn't actually have software development experience going into FedEx. I didn't have any idea how good at software development I was. I got into FedEx, and I learned more than I've learned probably in any other job. Well, definitely in any other job from the technical perspective. But I learned so much, and I learned really quickly. I think you'll probably find you've got some experience in the past. As you transition back into a software development job, you'll probably have a similar feeling of like, yeah, I just need to get comfortable reusing these tools, learning how things work at this job, and then diving into it and just paying attention to learning as you go. Like, I spent a lot of time with my senior developers in my first year, asked a lot of questions, got time from them, asked about best practices. I think that's really how you take it. You might feel a little rusty, but you'll learn, and you'll learn really, really fast. So I think you're definitely on a good track there. Whew, I'm tired. My throat hurts. All right, Walker's done. We might come down to, no, this is just a template, so we're not coming down to that one. We did Mahmoud. Cool. Thanks for sharing that one as well. Just for the people that are here, I don't know if Brian covered this, if you came from his stream in the last hour and a half or so. Peerreviews.dev is something that Brian and I started to do, basically give feedback to developers on design, code, resume, portfolio, that kind of stuff. We haven't been very active in it, but I think Brian's been doing recently, but I think Brian has been doing his design reviews again on his channel, which if you didn't come from there and you've been on mine, check it out, Brian L. Robinson. And I felt like this was a good day to do a resume one as well. So maybe I will do that on a regular basis as well, and just run through a few of these resumes as well. Is it common to be a contractor for 2 months? I don't know. I've never been in that space. Feel free, anyone else in the chat, if you have much experience with contracting, to kind of chime in. I would imagine that happens. You're just looking for someone to come in and fill a void really quickly. I imagine it happens. I just don't know how often. Did anyone else, I'm going to give a second here, anyone else in the chat, did you submit a resume that we haven't looked at yet? I've got a couple that are in the backlog that if we don't have anyone that's here in the stream, I'll go ahead and review those. But if you're in the stream and you submitted or you want to submit a resume, go to peerreviews.dev and then let me know in the chat, and I'll go and grab it out of the Trello card and pull it open. I'm going to take a break, take a deep breath, and give you a second to do that if you want to. I also didn't bring water with me, which sucks. I should have grabbed some. Done 2 months contracts in the past. Cool. Anyone with a resume? If not, I will start with this one that I've got ready to go. Sweet. All right, I'll get up and going with this one. Yeah, really, Brian, thanks for commenting that. Peerreviews.dev is a really cool site. I'm totally in the Jamstack space with you and just like piecing stuff together. Peerreviews.dev is an 11C site with an integration into Trello on form submissions via serverless function. I've got a whole talk on that I could kind of rant and rave about. To give you an idea of what this looks like, I'll just kind of flash this over here. This is what our requests look like, the ones we have in the backlog to shoot, to edit, scheduled, and then the ones that we've put out live. So that's just kind of an idea of what that process looks like in Trello for us to go through and work through these. I don't know why that keeps getting off. You can't see it, but Trello keeps like maximizing its space in a really awkward way. Some serverless and AWS stuff, designing a thing for a client as we speak. It's so much fun. It's cool. I love it. Cool. All right, this resume, I'm not going to mention the name. I don't know if that's someone, if they wanted it to be mentioned. So I'm going to hide all of that information. The initial feedback is, one, we're going down to 2-3 pages. Definitely want to shorten and optimize this resume. The easiest thing I recommend for people that are in this position, one, I don't think it's important to have something as nice as Adewale's resume. I don't like that one is really, really nice. I don't think it's important to have something that nice. I think it is important to have something that has a little bit of design to it to make it aesthetically pleasing, have a little splash of color, and then have some organization in your content. For the amount of content to take up 3 pages is way too much. So work experience, I think like the sidebar option with skills and other things is really useful. These are a lot of skills. One of the things that I'm skeptical of is when you say things like negotiation, procurement, persuasion. That's a little odd to me. And some of this, I don't mean this in a bad way at all. Some of this may be a little cultural as well. People, I don't know how resumes and wording are perceived in different cultures. So some of this might just be a little cultural. That seems a little odd to me. That's not a skill that I would include. I don't know what emotional intelligence means. Capable of working with little or no supervision. These sort of like really generic skills, they don't do anything for me personally. You saying that you have good communication skills on your resume doesn't mean anything to me. That's the kind of thing that I'm going to gauge in the resume. So for me, I would look at this whole section of skills to say, I don't need those. They don't mean anything to me personally. These are the things that I'm going to gauge and talk about with you in an interview. Fluent in different languages, that's cool. Chatbot developer, I wouldn't list that as a skill. I would more focus on technology areas where you built these chatbots. What technologies did you use? What platform did you use to build these chatbots? Basic knowledge of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. All this also depends on what kind of jobs you're applying for. I don't have that context here. If you're applying for development jobs, I would stress HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, any whatever technologies were used for the chatbot developer. Microsoft Office, again, for me, I kind of assume that's a given. And if it's not, that raises a flag of how often you actually use computers, if that makes sense. So I think a lot of those are unnecessary. Let's come back up to instructor and trainer on Air Force Base. Wow, that's pretty intense. Train on Microsoft packages, comprehensive instructional materials. So this starts to make me wonder if you're applying for a development position or if you're looking more. I'm not actually sure what this person is looking for. So that would tweak the feedback that I would give. Procurement, supervision, automobile engineer, build and assemble machines. Very interesting experience. Without the context of what you're applying for, I would then, whatever this person is applying for, I would then focus on kind of the wording and things to focus around that, if that makes sense. We go down to education, Department of Technical Education, second class upper. Again, this might be a cultural thing. I don't know what that means, so it doesn't do much for me. Secondary school probably doesn't help you there. Primary school really probably doesn't help you there as well. Certificates and trainings, build your own chatbot, project management. I would focus on which one of these are really the most important. Again, without the context, I can't really jump in there. Awards, contribution development. I feel like that's pretty cool. National Youth Service Corps. And then 10K. Your 10K is really not gonna help you very much. So again, the big thing is I don't have the context of what this person is applying for, what type of role. I think it needs a little bit of structure. It needs a little bit of color and design. Probably just use that Google template that we talked about earlier. It'll change things drastically, just that, and then just focus on the things that are most important for the role that this person is applying for. Cool. Wes, is this the Wes that I met in Nashville? Is that US? Haha, yeah, what's up, man? I think if you want to submit a resume on peerreviews.dev, I can pull that and we can review yours next if you're up for it. So I'll give a second for that one to come through. On the way there, cool. Let me know when you've submitted, and I will. What did I just do? I just like shifted all of that windows on my monitor. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, cool. I'll give you a second. Let me know when you've submitted that, and we'll go and review Wes's resume next. In the chat, any other thoughts so far on resumes or things you'd like to hear about, questions you have on experience or resumes, what to list, what not to list, how far back to go, what's important, that kind of stuff? Let me know in the chat. Got a lot of people in here, by the way. Virgo Pros is a return viewer. Ryan Warner Codes. What's up, Ryan? Thanks for being here. RQ Ravmra. Sorry, don't know how to say that one. Automatics. MNSXVD. Me Too Creates. Lurks. Lance, I think, has been here before. Jade Nielsen. A lot of people in here I don't recognize. Annan. Alfred Judokus. Cool. Welcome, everyone. Glad to have everyone here. Mahmoud, thanks for coming. Thanks for sharing your resume and letting us review that. I really appreciate it. Hopefully I'll see you again in the future. How are we doing on the resume, Wes? I think I'll give a second for that one to come through, and I'll go ahead and review this one. This is another one that's been in the backlog. So go ahead and run through this. Let's see. Objective, challenging software engineering career. Career shouldn't be capitalized. In an organization that rewards dedication and proficiency in design and development, testing, implementation. So here's my thing. With these kind of statements, it's basically just lip service to me. That sort of, I'm looking for an organization that rewards dedication and proficiency and so on and so on. Those are just words. Those are the kind of things that I'm going to have to gauge in an interview, if that makes sense. So I'm kind of anti-cliches in a lot of ways. This feels very cliche-y, where I'm going to like say the things that like kind of I don't know. It feels cliche. So it doesn't mean much to me. I like the idea of having a statement or two about who you are and what's important. If those are the things that are really, truly important to you, then maybe that makes sense. For me, it doesn't mean very much, but often those types of things don't. So that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I might think about exactly what you're trying to portray in this objective. For printed out resumes, is it important to have links to publish projects? So I mentioned this earlier. If your link is relatively short, I would probably go and include the link written out on your resume. That way, if they print it out and they don't have a digital copy, they could type it in. If it's a really long URL and no one's going to type that in anyway, I wouldn't. And then I would just include like a hyperlink in the digital copy. A great suggestion by Robert Tables is to use a bit.ly link also. So you can grab a short link in bit.ly for a longer URL and include the bit.ly link. That's a great suggestion. Robert, thanks for throwing that in there. But in general, you do want to give people access to the projects that you want them to see to verify who you are and what you do. So back on this resume, this looks really nice. This is really clean. I wonder where you got this, or if this is a designer. It looks really nice. I like the icons. I like the splash of purple. Again, you don't need an overwhelming amount of color. I just want a little bit of splash to see a little bit of contrast in your text. One of the potential downsides of definitely downside of a lot of color, if people print resumes, you don't want to have like an orange resume, right? So this is a splash. I don't think it's too bad to print, but it does look really, really nice inside of here. So working as a business intelligent architect, I will say this text is a bit hard to read. I don't think that's a big deal. I might make it a bit bigger, make it a little bit easier, because I'm having a look in here a little bit. So Azure Data Factory, Data Lake, SQL Server. I'm always an advocate of bolding the bolding keywords that make the most sense. So Azure Data Factory, Data Lake, if those are the things that are useful for you going forward and whatever you apply for next, I would throw those things in bold and really make them stand out. Python, same thing. University of Alabama contract, January to March. That's interesting for just a month. We talked about this earlier. Contracts can't be short. A month seems really short. I would ask you about that in an interview. How did it go? And why it was only a month. If it was just a month because that's what they were looking for, that's totally fine. You got some good buzzwords in here. ASP.NET, MVC6, and D3. SQL Server, again, I would bold those, make them stand out. Wrote windowing logic in SQL. I'm not a database guy, but I don't know what windowing logic is. May just be me. Again, some keywords, .NET, MVC, to get past and forecast. To get past and forecast weather info, I would say get previous and forecasted weather information. That's a small wording change there. I would probably do that. Database, SQL Server. I like this. Writing procedure. Procedure probably doesn't need to be capitalized. And function. So probably stored procedure, and I don't know what function and functions, to handle 220 million records. Having numbers in your resume, especially if you work on something with like a lot of data or a lot of users or a lot of views, those are the numbers that are really useful to have inside of your resume. So I would bold that as a really useful word in here. Any numbers, facts that you can throw at the things, the impact you've had, or the scale of systems that you worked on, definitely throw those things in there. I might argue skills could go above experience. I think if you throw that at the top, that gives me an idea of what you do, and then I get the reinforcement with the experience. I would probably do that. I don't think it's a misstep if you don't. It seems okay. Certifications, .NET Framework, Web, .NET, IBM. I think you're probably more in a space that I'm not super familiar with. I'm not in like big data and that sort of stuff. So I'm not familiar with data analytics and a lot of these keywords and buzzwords, but I think the resume looks nice. A few different suggestions, making the text a little bit bigger, maybe changing the wording on this to be a little less cliche for my skill or for my desire. But overall, I think it looks good, and it sounds like looks like you've got some good experience on there. Cool. The years aren't correct on the middle to 2000. Oh, wow. Nice typo catch. Yeah, nice. Very cool. Thanks for participating. OTL Maddox. Does that stand for, what does that stand for? Anything in particular? Good catch. This is always the piece of feedback too, is go and get someone else to review your resume before you send it off, to catch tiny things like that. Even though I didn't catch it, send it around to several people and maybe they will. Yeah, maybe that's a long-standing job that is going to last for almost 100 years. You don't know. I mean, you could ask. We can probably assume. But maybe it's a long-standing job. Anyway, cool. Thanks for catching that and participating. Appreciate it. And I just closed the wrong window. Let me grab my Twitch chat open again, because I closed the wrong window. Rats. All right, I think I'm back. And I just lost the history of the chat. If you said anything important to me in the last 30 seconds, say it again in the chat. I think we've got Wes's resume in Trello. Let me pull this up. And I will scroll down relatively quickly and focus on here. So, Wes, thanks for sending this over. You've got a... Oh, you did the boot camp at Vandy. That's right. Never mind. I was like, another Vandy student. Anyway, so you've got a lot of stuff on here is the first thing I notice. So still one page. I think it's organized fairly well. You've got a lot of stuff, and I would parse down these things by a pretty good amount. So what library? So if I'm going from a modern JavaScript perspective, jQuery is still so popular, it's probably worth having on there. Materialize, the CSS framework, I think. Handlebars I wouldn't include. I don't really think of it as a library. We don't have to debate about whether or not it is. I just don't think it's as useful from the perspective of the resume. I'm trying to think. You've got to cut down. It's just a lot, and I think you need to cut down a little bit somewhere. JavaScript, TypeScript. Some of these you can do by like putting them side by side, like JavaScript / TypeScript. They go hand in hand for the most part. Maybe various template engines could cover. Yeah, so that, like, I could think of that as like a templating concept. But then that still takes up even more, like various template engine, like that takes up even more space. You've got great stuff on there. You've got all the buzzwords that I would want to see for a various amount of work. So that's great. Maybe we'll come back to that. You've got good stuff there. It seems like a lot. Maybe it makes more sense than I think initially. So let's scroll down to 1. And Wes, correct me if I'm wrong. What is your degree in? And do you have a degree? And if you don't, that's totally fine. That's not why I'm asking. I'm asking because if your degree is not in computer science, or if you don't have a degree, what I would probably advocate for is that your education at the boot camp needs to be more important. So if you start taking away from even the main work experience in here needs to get a little bit smaller. You've got keywords in here, which is good. You could bold some of those. I just think it makes them stand out a little bit more. I would figure out a way to take a couple of lines from that, and then I would add a couple of lines probably to the boot camp from Vanderbilt, not just because it's my alma mater and it's amazing, but because that is one of the things that is most relevant for your experience, and people need to understand, I think, a little bit about what that program is. So Lawrence is saying 7 bullet points on Exolus is too much. Yeah, I would definitely make that 3 or 4 and figure out how to shorten those things. You got good keywords in there, which is good. So I think you're good there. I would say if it could be that if a position calls out a specific templating engine in their job description. Yeah, fair enough. So that's also one of the things that I haven't really touched on. I've touched on a little bit. Your resume depends on what kind of role you're applying for. If you're applying for different types of role, your resume should be tweaked to optimize it for a general role. Your resume also gets customized based on the specific job and job description that you're applying for. So one easy way to potentially limit the amount of technologies that are in here, if they say that they work with Bootstrap, well, Materialize, it's still a CSS framework. It's still relevant. If they say they work with a specific database, then you probably don't need to list all of these databases. You could pick a couple. If they mention a specific templating engine, you could reference that specific one. I still think I'm like thinking I want to advocate to take some of these away, but I also at the same time think they just make sense. So I'm not sure. Here's one of the things that I would kind of push back on then from that perspective. You've got 5 different databases listed. Where have you used those databases and where do you have experiences with them? And I think I might feel more strongly about this. So you've got 5 different databases. Inside of your experience, you reference Redis here. And then Mongo again. So I would start to push back. If you don't have experience that's relevant to these projects, it's questionable whether you throw on 3 or 4 other different databases. I think experience with a couple, especially if you have one NoSQL and one SQL, that kind of covers the general landscape of databases in general. I think you could probably suffice with that. AWS Lambda API Gateway, those are still cool. Serverless. So we met at a serverless conference, by the way, so no surprise that you've got some serverless experience. Serverless FM. What's the serverless framework? That's the like open source serverless framework. That's cool too. So I'm debating about how to cut any of those. I think they make sense. I think what I would more focus on is getting rid of a couple of lines of your main experience, shortening that a little bit, making sure you still have those buzzwords in there, maybe bold them if you feel like it. Your SEO content specialist. So this is getting into WordPress, it looks like, with the Yoast SEO plugin, keyword research, data analytics, attracting new users. Here's the great place for numbers to really stand out. So you say you've attracted new users with organic searches. Do you have numbers to back that up? That would be more impactful than just the word. So if you have numbers to back that up, I would throw that in there. Image optimization, I would be curious how and in what way you did that. Was it something that WordPress just takes care of you? All of the users, both of them, thank you. Was it something that WordPress took care of for you, or did you actually work with some sort of image optimization API or software or something like that? You got personal projects on here, which is great. I would probably, just from a small design thing, I would probably just put the link on the same line as the title. For some reason, to me, it looks a little bit odd or cramped being right underneath. You could probably argue the other way if it was side by side. I would put it side by side. That's just my preference. Full stack job scraping website for retrieving updated job posts from Indeed. Nice. That's cool. Did you build that from scratch? If so, that's super cool. I'm gonna actually open that up. This is what I would do if I was looking at this. I would probably spend just a minute if it's gonna open that link here. There we go. That looks really nice. I like this. So are these just links to Indeed? What does that go to? Or is this showing just jobs that are from Monster? Also interesting small thing. If you look at on the screen in the bottom left, when I hover over this button, it shows me what page it's supposed to go to, but it doesn't go to that page because it doesn't change the URL. That's kind of a side thing. I'm just kind of interested. So this looks really nice. Let's see, click on, is this like the details or is this, I'm not sure. Is this adding? I'm not sure what that would be. Um, anyway, I think it looks nice. Maybe make sure if people poke around that it makes sense for them. So this is a link to the job. Cool. That's awesome. Link to that job. I think that's a great demo to have. I'm not sure what the comment is for. Yeah, I think that's super cool to have on your resume. And then you have Orchestrate, sophisticated managing tool for artists and managers. Cool. So you got some different keywords in here, which is fun. See if it'll open this one up. I like panicked for a second. I didn't see OBS for like 1 second, and I was nervous that it had gone away. So Orchestrate, so I'd have to sign in or sign up, which I won't do at this point. That looks cool, at least. So good, really cool that you've got some relevant technologies referenced, and you've got links for people to go and see as well. Did we talk about the fact that you lived in Fort Lauderdale? So I lived in Fort Lauderdale for a couple years, and that's actually where I went the day after I left Nashville, where we met, and spoke at a conference there. I lived in Davie, just west of Fort Lauderdale, for what it's worth. I would debate whether or not the musician experience is relevant enough. Here's the interesting thing is some feedback I got recently just in resumes in general is like your resume should tell a story. So as I question whether or not it's relevant, that also paints a story for who you are and shows a little bit of your like multifacetedness. Is that a word? To show you've got some other characteristics about you. So actually thinking about that and the story that it helps tell, I think that is helpful. But I would probably move that at least below the Vanderbilt bootcamp and maybe move the Vanderbilt bootcamp up higher. And with a couple of bullet points to explain the boot camp, because I'm sure it was a lot of work and you learned a ton. So I would just like overly sell the boot camp and its value there. So cool. Wes, any other questions or responses? Anyone in the chat? Any other thoughts on Wes's resume? I still need this like awkward silence sound. I've embraced awkward silence, but so awkward. Cool. Wes, thanks for sharing. I really appreciate that. Hopefully that helped a little bit. And yeah, looking forward to staying in contact. I will probably be back in Nashville a couple times this year. So I'll definitely see you hopefully at some of the meetups there as I look to speak at one. Anyone else in the chat got a resume that they would like to have looked at? I'm getting close to wearing down on my voice specifically. I'm getting kind of tired. But any other resumes in the chat? Are there any go-to can't fail resume templates you suggest? I don't have that much experience with templates. I can say we pulled this one up earlier. This is the template that that I used, Lawrence. It's simple. It's got the sections broken down the way I think of them on the sidebar. I like this one a lot. So I think it's the first one that shows up when you search or when you just look for a template on Google Docs. So that's one of the downsides. You might see a lot of resumes that look like that. But I don't care. Like I recognize the first resume I reviewed was this template, but it was customized, which actually had a nice effect to it and was different enough. But as a hiring manager, I don't care if you chose a resume template, but I much prefer your resume if it has a little bit of structure and design and a little splash of color to it than someone's who has absolutely none. So for that, in that regard, I think it's worth choosing a template, especially if you find one that you like. And this one, even if a lot of people use it, that's what mine is. I don't care that a lot of other people are using it. I just think it looks clean enough and I don't have to worry about like going overly designy with it. So I don't know. Just give a search. I like this as like a traditional kind of breakdown of content. Michu says, I've been distracted, kind of missed most of it. That's all right. No worries. Only other thing was weird to me was the music experience. Unless it was a leadership position, what was the purpose? So yeah, this is an interesting thing where the music experience doesn't seem necessarily directly related, but a resume is there to tell a story about who you are, and it may not have any impact. If it's taking away from something that's more impactful and more relevant, then start to think about that more. if it's not taking away from something else, you might even get like this emotional connection with someone. If they are also a musician, they happen to look at that and they're like, oh, that's interesting. But there's this idea, like when you apply to college, a lot of the things they want to see is like, have you volunteered and what are your hobbies and what do you do outside of class? Like they like to see people who have different sides to them. So the musical experience helps tell that story. Fun fact about me, I worked with a women's basketball team in college, and that was on my resume for several years until I just kind of like outgrew that in terms of time. But that was on my resume as like part of the women's basketball team, not like an actual player, but just like part of the group. And that was really cool. Like I actually got like some comments and conversations about that because some people misread it and thought I played women's basketball, which I didn't, but, it led to some conversation. So it gives you a little extra thing to have a touch point on. With that template, you prefer mess up a scanning machine. Can't think of the word OCR. I'm not sure how it would mess up scanning. I'm not sure what you mean by that. For resume, I've got some volunteer and board experience and a whole bunch of things that I would put on. Yeah. So yeah, and you can pick and choose, right? The things that you're applying for, does it make sense for this job? Again, if it's taking away from something that's more impactful, then definitely take it or seriously consider taking it away. But just make sure the things that you want them to know about yourself are portrayed on your resume. Sweet. Good conversation. Good questions. Brian, I'm going to give you another shout out here. So Brian L. Robinson in the chat has been doing design reviews. When is your next design review? Are they all Wednesdays at 10 Central? I love the heart. Is that the right timing on your schedule? Our Wednesday stream at 10 a.m. The CDT, is that the same as CST? Or is it actually CDT and I just don't know my time zones? Central Daylight Time. So what is CST? Central Standard Time? Oh, I have no idea what the difference between daylight and standard is. Huh. Y'all are like really... Yeah, I have no idea what the difference in that is. I feel really dumb. Okay. Huh. Okay. Well, I guess I need to specify that in the future. Anyway, Punisher, thanks for coming. I really appreciate you being here and submitting your resume as well. Brian says, what did you say? Contemplating more design streams if there's interest. I would recommend this for people that are out there. If you have, I struggle with design. It's not my thing. I would take advantage of the fact that Brian is giving free design advice. He has lots of experience in design and is my go-to person when I have some questions that I like to ask and get feedback on. So take advantage of that as a free resource out there. Brian is super knowledgeable. And we give each other lots of shout outs on this kind of stuff because we work a lot together. In the same vein, does anyone have something they would like to shout out about themselves? I would love to help kind of promote some of the things that people on the channel are doing. If you have anything that you're proud of, that you worked on, please share in the chat. I'd love to take a look. Time goes forward an hour. It becomes a different time zone, a daylight time. Wow. Yeah, this is a whole new thing for me. I know that like daylight savings time, but I didn't know that it changes what the time zone acronym is. Anyway, thanks for the feedback. Heading out to lunch. Wes, thanks for coming. Really good to meet you in Nashville. Really hoping to stay connected through these different avenues of online content and in-person content, hopefully. So thanks for coming. All right, anybody, as I wind down, any shout outs, things that people are working on, you're proud of, share in the chat. I want to see what you're doing, what you're proud of. Oh, actually, I forgot. One last review that I have to do, which is a little interesting for me, is Chris is here. There's another celebrity in the house, or a celebrity, I don't know if he's the only celebrity in here. Chris on Code. If you don't know Chris, you should follow him for all the things that he does. He's been an amazing collaborator of mine, also an influencer and just overall amazing. So check out Chris on Code if you haven't before. And let's see, is this a YouTube video from, oh cool, your YouTube channel. Nice. Let me make sure I get that open. From Adewale, has got his YouTube channel and introduced you to breaking the code. These are really cool covers, by the way. Awesome. Tech, lifestyle, gaming tutorials, and adventure. So dive into that if you haven't already. Subscribed. Nice. Cool. Proud of an app I'm building. K for Karma. Deploy board IO. Let me pull this over on my main monitor. This looks really nice. Deployment tracking. Tracking your application deployments is hard. We help you gain visibility on your deployment status so you spend less time looking for answers. Really cool. I actually just had this conversation the other day where for Netlify, I would like to send myself a text message when a build finishes instead of having to go and check in the dashboard. I'd like to just get a text message. I don't know if this is something that would solve that, but really cool. Really cool project. Thanks for sharing. So this is Deploy Board IO, where you can track your application deployments, deployment status. You can spend less time looking for answers. Awesome. SMS text messages coming soon. Cool. Thanks for sharing that. All right. So the one last resume I have to do is from another friend of mine online, Chris DeMars, who is, let's see, how far up do I scroll? I think that's as far as I go. Chris was going to help me out by sending his resume, so I've got it here to review. It's pretty clean and concise. It is 2 pages, and we'll look through and see, actually 3 pages, so maybe that's something that I would recommend cutting back on. Let's start at the top. I think one piece of feedback, without showing all of his information, one piece of feedback is at the top, he's got multiple lines of like GitHub and email and other links that take up like 4 lines. I would maybe put those on the same line if you can make that look good or not bad, and have it take up less vertical space just to try to shorten this down a little bit. My goal is to design, develop, and improve web experiences by making them visual appealing and also functional. Teaching, learning, and speaking are additional passions I embrace within the web and software community, motivated to produce excellent results as well as grow my field. So I mentioned earlier, someone had one of these like introduction, like couple of sentences similar to this, and that one felt cliche. Maybe it's just because I know Chris and the things that he's good at and the skills that he has. This seems more genuine to me and seems a little bit more impactful. So I actually really like this one. I think it's a very good representation of who he is as a person and the things that he's interested in. So he talks about web experiences, making them visual appealing, accessible, performant. If you know Chris, Brian, thanks for coming. Good luck at your meeting. Talk to you later. Thanks for being here. If you know Chris, you know he is passionate about those things. You look down at strong skills, HTML, CSS, accessibility, design systems. Those things kind of reinforce the message that he's sending in those sentences at the very top. He also is very passionate about teaching, learning, and speaking. I think these are awesome things to have. If you're looking to hire someone, 2 different people that equally have the same technical skills, if one is a better communicator and leader and teacher and can work with other people and help bring them along, you're going to hire that person. So I like that you have that stressed, Chris, in your intro. One thing that you could do is you could say, this is being a little picky, you could save a line by shortening this sentence or potentially getting rid of that sentence. But I think that sentence is powerful as well. So I really like that intro. Here's some things that I don't know much about, and this might just be me. It might mean more to jobs that you might apply for in the future. I don't know what all of these acronyms are. I know what Lighthouse is. I don't know what any of the rest of them are. So for me personally, they don't mean much. If those are things that when you apply to jobs in your field are relevant, certainly include them and run with that. I just don't know. What those mean. Accessibility tools. Brian, here, while you're here before you go, are those things that in your mind make sense to include on your resume if your strong suit is accessibility? I'll let you answer that one better than I can. If you get to answer before you head out, we'll see if you make it. But one small piece of feedback on this is a little bit hard to read in terms of they're all strung together, especially with lots of things in parentheses, which makes the core pieces a little hard to read. So this would be a little bit more of a reason for me to advocate that like HTML, CSS, accessibility, design system, CSS architectures, like if those are buzzwords that make sense, I think the details would probably sell themselves and clean this up a little bit. Maybe there's a different way to organize it, but it's a little hard to read, to focus on like the key buzzwords, I guess. Brian says it's proof of your knowledge that it's not just Lighthouse for scores that are good. Fair enough. They're good for seeing the actual usage for someone using the tools. Okay. Yeah, like I said, I'm not the person who's going to be the best to know about those types of things. So if that makes sense, again, for the field that you might apply for, cool, keep that in there. The only caveat is it's a little hard to read, to pick out what the most important parts are of that section, if that makes sense. Content management system, Gatsby, Prismic, Site, Affinity, WordPress. In an interview, I would ask what experience do you have in these different fields? I would expect you to be able to talk about those, especially Gatsby with me. If I was your interviewer, I'm a Gatsby guy. I would want to know what your experience is, how much you've actually worked with it for it to be listed on your resume. So you'll have to answer that one for yourself. Chris, knowledgeable in JavaScript, specifying ES6. I think that's good. Had a debate with someone the other day of like, I mentioned paying attention, learning vanilla JavaScript and ES6 syntax and ES6 JavaScript. And someone called me out and said, well, you know that like ES6 is vanilla JavaScript, which is very true, absolutely true. But there's still a big distinguishing factor between ES5 JavaScript and ES6 JavaScript. And I want to know, do you have experience with ES6 JavaScript? Because it is enough of its own set of features to specifically learn about, if that makes sense. So I highly recommend, if you don't have experience with ES6, even if you're strong in vanilla JavaScript, that's great. ES6 is still vanilla JavaScript, but it is enough of a difference to have some specific entry point into. All right, certifications and awards. Chris is a badass. Oracle Ambassador, Microsoft MVP. I didn't know he was an MVP for Microsoft. Google Developer Expert. I'm curious why this one has descriptions while the other one doesn't. That a GDE is probably, especially in field, enough of a title for people to know what you're talking about. So if we're looking to cut a little bit off of your resume, you could cut down the GDE description. It's probably self-explanatory, but you can kind of figure it out for yourself. I would probably move those below the experience section. I think the experience section is probably what people are looking for first and foremost, and then they will give some focus to the certifications and awards at the end. I would probably rotate those two. I typically, my general recommendation for resumes is 3 to 4 bullet points on your job. And this is hard for people in general. It's really hard to let go of, I really want to stress this thing. Some of those things are not the most important things that you want to stress. So built and implement the TNN UI kit. That's pretty cool. Small team to diagnose, triangle, and fix accessibility errors. 3 bullets for sure, max. Cool. Chris is doubling down on what I'm saying. It's a hard thing to do, especially when you're really proud of the experience you have, but you really have to spend some time thinking about what are the most important things that I want to communicate, and what are the things that I can also talk about in an interview. So I mentioned this before, your resume is literally strictly to get you in the door. Without a resume, you can't get an interview, but in an interview, your resume, the words on the resume almost mean nothing. In an interview, it's what you say, it's how you respond, it's how you answer questions, it's how you write code, it's how you do your demo or your presentation, whatever the interview is, it's how you do that thing that decides whether or not you get the job. So think about on your resume, when you have what I would call too many bullet points, what are the most important things that get you in the door, and then elaborate on those things with the other points in your interview and really sell who you are and the experience that you have. So here's an example of one: develop and implement features across different websites. Features is too vague. It doesn't have much impact for me. That bullet point doesn't mean much. Seeing A/B tests, that could be really interesting. 100% score on Lighthouse. There's probably a couple of these that you can combine. This probably doesn't make as much sense, but create A/B tests and optimize for accessibility. achieving a score of 100%. I like that you have a number in here, having a tangible result, but some way to eliminate some of these bullet points and maybe combine a couple and get rid of a little bit of the fluff. Like they should be like straight to the point, use this, this, and this to achieve this, like really straightforward. And I think you actually have done a pretty good job of that, but I would just shorten up a little bit. You worked in Troy, Missouri. So do you also work for, well, one, my family, I have family that lives in Troy or outside of Troy. So that's kind of cool. I'm assuming that's remote also. I'm also assuming that this is a secondary job that you have. So that's kind of interesting. I would ask Chris more about that maybe when we chat. But anyway, same feedback on here. You could probably cut down one of these bullet points. I like that you have numbers for tangible results, 94%, 6 seconds to 2 seconds. I'm always a fan of bolding those kind of things, make those things stand out. Again, people that look at a resume spend 10 seconds, I think, on average, whatever it is. Looking at resumes, the more you can make things jump out, the better. Built components using BIM, increased development time, powerful. Increased development time by 50%, nailed it, absolutely great. Bold that, let me know that that's super important. Knowledge sharing sessions, that's cool. You're a leader, you're a teacher, you enjoy working with people. That's nice, cool. And then you go back, I kind of like this, you go back with previous experience, you don't have details because those are further back than you think you might need. I think that makes sense. You can keep those on your resume. Or at least, sorry, for this one without a detail. This without personal projects, this one doesn't mean as much. I won't fight you too much if you want to keep that. But if personal projects are not specifically part of your resume, that one doesn't mean as much. Isn't increasing dev time? Did I read that wrong? Let's see, where was that? That was the 50% increased development time. So yeah, that sounds, so maybe he's saying how much you can do in a certain period of development time. I would more think this is a typo and certainly should read decreased unless there's a specific caveat. But regardless of what the intent is, it reads as increased, even though I missed it. I would change that to be decreased development time by 50%. Great catch, Carm. I appreciate that. Professional appearances. I would probably lump professional appearances and community involvement together. So I think inside of community involvement, you can have one line for public speaker and just have a link to your speaking page. That'll save you that many lines of code. Community involvement, you've got a lot. I don't know. Maybe you don't need all of them. Maybe you can cut back on a few of these as well. So maybe think about which of these are the most important and only keep the ones there that are most important. Sweet. Overall, though, this resume looks really nice. I really enjoy this. I enjoy it. Let's see how far up I can scroll with hopefully not giving too much stuff away. So you got your front-end developer and UX architect, Microsoft MVP, GDE, international speaker. That's a really cool thing to have at the top. I think that kind of reinforces that you probably don't need the description of the GDE program. Chris on here is a GDE. Chris, as a GDE on your resume, do you have a description of what the GDE program is? You can chime in if you include that on your resume. I think it's probably reasonable to get rid of that description. But I think the resume is well organized. I think I love the splash of color. That's one of the things that I talk about. I love the contrast in text. It's a simple thing, but having bold versus not seems pretty standard, but it's a nice contrast. Yeah, overall, I think it looks really good. A couple of things that I would change, maybe get rid of the description here, maybe find a way to structure these skills a bit differently to focus on which one of these are the most important. Bolding some of the technologies that are most important and the numbers that you have in your experience section. Let's see. Chris says, I would update that to show the GDE program is more exclusive. Let's see. Our global. Yeah. So if you look at that, that's a pretty straightforward, it's probably out of the books description of the GDE program. Maybe there is a way to really sell. I mean, it's a big deal. I look at people with the GDE title and I automatically have a certain level of respect for them because they've obviously done stuff really well. So maybe you can sell that a little bit more if you do keep it there to let people know that you are special. And I don't mean that in a bad way. Like, this is your time to let people know that. Cut down a few bullet points on this one. Maybe cut down one on this one. Maybe get rid of the freelance hobbyist if you don't have anything to back that up. If that's important that people know that, I'm okay, I think. I would tie your professional appearances. I would just have a speaking line under community involvement and then link to your website there. Also, just out of curiosity, I will... so on your GitHub, you've got a list of the conferences that you've spoken at. Great. That's perfect. I think that's the kind of thing that you want. You want, if people do any extra digging and you claim to do X, you want the things that people can see to reinforce those things. In this case, speaking. And obviously, Chris is a huge speaker, has spoken at a ton of different conferences, which is really, really cool. Going way back. That's a ton. I don't know how he travels as much as he does, but he has. So overall, love the resume. Really cool. A couple of small things just to be picky and give you some feedback that I would recommend. And thanks, Chris and Karma, for jumping in and having some suggestions as well. So that was the last one I wanted to go through. My voice is very tired. My throat hurts. Any other questions, comments, things that you would like to spend a minute discussing before we wrap this whole thing up? And since Chris is on here, give a shout out to Chris again. Definitely check out the content that he creates. He's on Twitch as well at Chris on Code, on Twitter, on YouTube as well. So lots of content out there to get from Chris. Any other shout outs for the people that are here, for the people from Memphis that are in the chat? Thanks for always supporting it and being in here. I appreciate that. And thanks everyone else for being here as well. So I'll give like 30 seconds just to see if there's any other comments. If not, I'm going to call it a day and go get some lunch. This is where I need my awkward silent music. What's for lunch? I got to figure that out. We've got, Ryan, thanks for being here. I appreciate it. No worries. The other day we made some, I don't even know what you call it. So it's a mix of sweet potatoes, chickpeas, Brussels sprouts, sausage, and kale. And you basically just like cook it all in a skillet. And it's delicious. And we've got leftovers. So I think that's probably what I'm going to be eating for lunch. And Chris, you've probably got like another hour or so before you eat. So what's on your lunch menu for today when you get around to it? Nice. We got a follower for Chris. And I just crossed the 100 follower mark on Twitch, which is pretty cool. I think that's I'm surprised that I've had this many people engage, which is a lot of fun. So thanks everyone again for being here. Chris is eating leftover Indian for lunch. That sounds good too. So looks like we're kind of dying down. I'm going to call it a day. I will be streaming on Friday with Otto from MongoDB. I will send out links on Twitter so you can go and follow that. And outside of that, I'll be back next Wednesday, 11 o'clock Central Time. And I'll see you there. Ryan, if you're asking me about Render ATL, I'm not speaking or going. If you're asking Chris, both of you, yeah, I'm not speaking there. Punisher, Adewale, thanks for coming. Appreciate it. I'm going to call it a day. See you all later and have a good afternoon, night, morning, whatever it is in your time zone. I'll talk to you later.